Labeling theory is the theory of how the self-identity and behavior of individuals may be determined or influenced by the terms used to describe or classify them. Labeling theory stems from the perspective of a symbolic interactionalist. It is associated with the concepts of self-fulfilling prophecy and stereotyping. For a labeling theorist, the causes of deviance isn't the main focus. Instead, the label and its meaning are the main focus. Here is an example of labeling theory. Labeling theory holds that deviance is not inherent to an act, but instead focuses on the tendency of majorities to negatively label minorities, or those seen as deviant from the standard cultural norms. In this case, the majority are the circles, and the minority are the squares, and those being labeled as deviant. Deviant does not have to equate wrongdoings. It can also include geniuses, the mentally ill, or simply whoever stands out from a crowd. There are two centralizing ideas for the labeling theory. The first is that deviance involves interaction between a deviant and the conventional. Based on the example that I've given, the deviant would be the square and the conventional actors would be the circles. The second centralizing idea is that interactions are governed by meaning given to the label and their power level. In the case of the circles and squares, there's no real definition of what a square is and why he is seen as deviant. Instead, he is an outcast, and because of that and a sheep mentality, the circles will simply isolate him from social gatherings, and that's a metaphor for life itself. The powerful have the ability to avoid labels despite deviant behavior. They can use their socioeconomic means to protect themselves from the negative effects of labels, or to hide that they have labels in the first place. Consequences of labeling would include a deviant has a tendency to view themselves as deviant, thus continuing their deviant behavior. Oftentimes, deviants believe or eventually believe that they are deviant, and then they will continue to act that way. Important contributors would be Emil Durkheim, who is considered the father of labeling theory because of his influential book Suicide. Many consider this the origin of labeling theory. A second key contributor would be Erwin Lemert. He created the terms primary deviation and secondary deviation. Primary deviation is considered the initial act of deviance before labeling. This would be the square simply being the square. However, secondary deviance would include further negative behavior because he believes that he is a deviant, not because he chose to do so in the first place. Like all theories, labeling theory has its own pitfalls. The first is that labeling theory cannot explain the causes of deviance because that is not its main focus. Instead, it focuses on the definition of the label itself. Second would be, studies have shown that being labeled deviant does not further deviant behavior. The third would be, the role of those in high socioeconomic positions are underestimated. These people would be considered the powerful who oppress the powerless.